Looking at Psalms as devotional reading is something that most people already do in part, because sometimes they look to the book of Psalms for encouragement, or sometimes when they're discouraged they will read a proverb or Psalms, because a lot of times New Testaments were containing the Gospels as well as Psalms and Proverbs, just to break it up for encouragement and for exhortation. In evotional, we've been looking at just segmenting it off so that it could be into about 360-day readings, so we could go through the entire year. And I know there's 365, but anyways, so we could go through the entire year of looking at sharing what God was doing in our day, with our day, according to the Psalms as He would speak to us. And yesterday in Psalm 5, we read from 1 through 4, and today we're picking up from 4 through 7. And so we'll read it and see what the Lord may say. Who knows? I don't know. Psalms is fun, so we're supposed to enjoy it and not be so consumed or presumed to be serious or too carried away about things, but let God do as He would do and speak as He would say for us to enjoy and to participate with Him in directing us in the way that we should go. So in verse 4, "Thou art not a God that hath pleasure in wickedness, neither shall evil dwell with thee. The foolish shall not stand in thy sight. Thou hatest all workers of iniquity. Thou shalt destroy them that speak leasing. The Lord will abhor the bloody and deceitful man. But as for me, I will come into thy house in the multitude of thy mercy, and in thy fear will I worship toward thy holy temple." God doesn't have pleasure in wickedness. There is nothing that is done that's wicked that God uses or allows to happen that He takes enjoyment out of. When He sees it, it grieves Him. It is a process that causes not just a immediate result, but it causes like a cancerous effect, that it'll affect everything around it, and it'll begin to cause it to become corrupted. And every corrupt thing that exists in creation, God is going to set aside in a place of damnation that He's reserved really for angels that were in rebellion, but He likewise has enlarged it to consume all that which is corrupted from what He intended it to be. So God takes corruption, and He takes the fallen angels, and He takes hell, and He takes death, and He takes a lot of things and throws them eventually into a lake of fire. But when He says here in Psalm 5 verse 4 that He has no pleasure in wickedness, there are things where people do take pleasure in being wicked. So the opposite is true too, that there are aspects of, call it satanic, or call it fallen angels, or call it corruption, or call it evil, but evil delights in wickedness, and wickedness is the action of doing things that are detrimental to someone or something or someplace that would be related to God or godliness or God's creation. So He doesn't take pleasure in evil, and He says that, or in wickedness, and He says no evil shall dwell with Him. In other words, in His sight, if you're evil or you're wicked, you won't be there. So recognizing that, then we know that in God we can find purity, in God we can find grace, in God we can find mercy. The foolish shall not stand in thy sight. God doesn't allow for those things that are distracting, attracting to the world, or just don't make any type of participatory involvement of holiness, righteousness, godliness, and you in His sight. He removes foolishness, and He doesn't want to deal with it at all. In our world today, we have a lot of foolishness that goes on, and we participate in it. It's often called tabloid journalism or tabloid Christianity, where we're more willing to participate in that which is enticing to the flesh than we are to beneficial of the spirit. So whenever you deal in foolish jesting or stupid ideas, or like man caves, or certain movies that portray the worst in man rather than the best in humanity, then you're participating in foolishness, and God does not want that in his sight. He doesn't bless that kind of behavior because it tears down and it makes a mockery of what God created and said was good. So anytime you create something that is foolish, then you're going against what God would intend to do when he wants to be thanked for what he's created. In 6, actually still in verse 5, it says that he hates workers of iniquity. Iniquity is always interesting because people define it in different ways, because it's a religious term. It's a big word, so to speak, that a lot of times people say, well, can you simplify it a little? And iniquity is doing something that's wrong. That's all it really is. It's not only sin, because a lot of times people don't treat a lot of our attitudes and a lot of our intentions as sin, so they just say, well, it's, sin is like murder or killing or doing something that's major. But they don't treat iniquity often as the same as sin, which God hates. But he hates anyone that works iniquity, in other words, that causes other people to stumble, that sets up the circumstances to cause people to trip or to fall, to set in place certain parameters that they know darn well that no one can live up to. For instance, like the religious Pharisees, that would cause us or anyone in this day or in Jesus' day to not be able to have a relationship with God, that would cause them to be pulling away from the loving Father who wants to have a personal relationship with you, but rather causes you to feel as though God were too holy and too righteous to spend any time with you. That would be a worker of iniquity, because what they're doing is they're spreading a net that trips you up in what's called religion, and that you don't wind up getting closer to God, but being farther away from him. A lot of times, iniquity is that. It's setting up circumstances that you yourself make and create your own sin out of because of the iniquity that was laid in front of you. And God says that he would destroy them that speak leasing, that also go to the opposite extreme, where they say that everything's okay. So on the one hand, he hates iniquity, and on the other hand, he hates setting free. Meaning that you have, as we like to say in fundamentalist Christianity, that all things are lawful to me, but not all things are expedient. And then they go out and do everything lawful and trip up people because someone sees them and looked up to them as a hero, and yet they went and abused that privilege. And though it may not be quote-unquote sin of death, it is something that trips up and causes a person to fall. And so leasing is that idea where you've taken something and you've extended it beyond what it was meant to be. You've made it a freedom that was never something that should have been free, but is really a matter of restraint, but you apply it to say that you're free. Freedom of religion, freedom of speech, freedom of choice. A lot of times these are ideas that we use and abuse to a point of creating a leasing effect. It says that the Lord would abhor the bloody and deceitful man, because at times a lie will cause people to die, literally, from the effects of what lying does, because it sets you up for a fall when you're unprotected, and that can cause you to eventually wind up far from God. And when he abhors it, it's like God doesn't even want to be around it. He doesn't even want to deal with it. He doesn't want to be around a deceitful person. So when we put on the belt of truth, we need to recognize that that belt of truth is contrary to a deceitful man. We need to choose the truth as opposed to a lie. Don't participate in slander. Don't participate in false accusations. Don't participate in those things where they're attacking dignitaries or authorities, not recognizing that God put those people in charge. That is deceitfulness personified in a way of bringing other people into their own anger and rebellion against God. But it says, as for me, and as for you, the direction we should go in Psalms 5, 4 through 7 is in verse 7. But as for me, I will come into your house, God. I will enter through the multitude of your mercies. In other words, I know that I too am like these deceitful men, these wicked men, these workers of iniquity, for I was one of them. But I will come in mercy and ask for forgiveness. I will come into your house and I will ask for your mercy and forgiveness because I fear you and I know that you are righteous and you abhor all these things, and I'm aware of them because of the truth that I now see as I read this in Psalms and as I apply it to myself. For I will worship towards your holy temple. I will aspire to become like you, God, and I want you to be with me as I take this journey of moving forward to become ever closer to you, as I know that I am not there today, but I want to be there tomorrow. So help me, God, as I go along this way, for I will come into your house, but I can only do so according to your mercy and according to your kindness and according to your forgiveness. So as we look to God, as we worship towards him, as we see him as he is, then recognize that though you may not be perfect, David has given us the reality of what is around us, and we can find ourselves full of his mercy towards us in that we trust God to forgive us by his mercy and his love. So today, take time in a moment. Though you may see all these things happening around you, workers of iniquity and lying and leasing or getting away with it, or thinking that they get away with it, and wickedness and evil, take the time for a moment to, instead of looking there, look where God is, and then move into a personal relationship with him, because by his mercy you can. And if you talk to God about it today, he will show you the way. And I think you'll find peace with God as opposed to frustration.